During the last ice age, the planet was locked in a harsh cold cycle. Global temperatures were 5 to 10 degrees Celsius lower than today. Massive ice sheets covered much of northern Europe, North America, and Siberia. Winters stretched on for months, and the brief summers were just long enough for grass and shrubs to grow before the snow returned. In this environment, human survival depended entirely on adaptability and the search for new resources. Food was scarce, tool-making materials were unevenly distributed, and human populations were separated by hundreds of kilometers of frozen land. At first glance, such natural conditions should have forced each group to live in isolation, relying only on what they had locally. But archaeology tells a different story. Flint stones, sourced from quarries hundreds of kilometers away, appear at hunting sites. Seashells are found deep in the interior, and mineral pigments, absent in the local geology, turn up in decorated caves. These traces raise a question. Why, in such harsh conditions, do humans still travel and trade instead of simply retreating into isolation to survive? Imagine a prehistoric man wrapped in a thick fur cloak, walking across a white expanse of snow that stretches to the horizon. On his shoulder hangs a leather pouch containing carefully shaped flint, one of the most important survival tools. He carries it not only for his own family, but also to trade with another group several days' walk away. The journey is not just to exchange for food or new materials, but also a chance to maintain relationships, share information, and sometimes arrange intertribal marriages. These are the earliest signs of proto-trade, a system of exchanging goods, ideas, and services that existed long before agriculture. There was no currency, no written contracts, but there were unspoken rules and trust built over generations. In the Ice Age context, trade was more than material exchange, it was a survival strategy. Because the frozen environment created uneven resource distribution, each group possessed something others needed. Shells and seafood belonged to coastal communities. Flint, obsidian, or pigments came from groups living near mineral deposits. Dried meat and hides came from skilled hunters on the steppe. This exchange reduced risk when a resource ran out or a hunting season failed, ensuring that people were not entirely dependent on their immediate surroundings. More importantly, trade acted as a social glue. Every trading meeting was also a moment to share stories, learn new techniques, examine the tools of other groups, and adapt them for personal use. These relationships formed interregional support networks, enabling humans to cooperate when facing major threats, from predators and climate shifts to conflicts. In recent decades, genetic and archaeological studies have shown that this connection extended beyond goods. Many ancient DNA samples reveal evidence of intertribal marriage, proof that trade also opened the way for genetic exchange, increasing resistance to disease and boosting genetic diversity in communities. The Ice Age was so harsh that any long-distance travel required meticulous planning and carried high risks. The fact that humans willingly undertook such journeys to trade demonstrates the vital importance of proto-trade. It ensured not just material security, but also reinforced social structure, fostered cooperation, and laid the foundations for the economic and social networks that would develop later. Part 2. The First Goods. From flint to red pigment. In the Ice Age's early economy, goods were neither abundant nor diverse. But for prehistoric people, every exchanged item held survival value or deep symbolic meaning. Archaeology reveals three main categories of goods that shaped the Ice Age trade network: flint and stone tools, shells and ornaments, and mineral pigments. 1. Flint and stone tools. The basis of survival. Flint was one of the most strategic resources of the era. When skillfully knapped, it produced sharp blades capable of cutting meat, skinning hides, shaping spear points, or scraping tools. Its ability to spark fire when struck against natural iron made it a dual-purpose asset, both a tool-making material and a fire starter. High-quality flint deposits were unevenly distributed. Some of the most prized quarries lay deep within limestone valleys or along ancient riverbeds, hundreds of kilometers from many communities. Archaeological finds in Europe show that tools made from Spions Flint, Belgium, appeared at sites over 200 kilometers from the source. This could only happen if stable exchange routes existed for generations. The value of flint went beyond technical function. A finely knapped, polished blade reflected the skill of its maker and the prestige of its owner. In many groups, gifting stone tools was a way to forge alliances or show goodwill during intergroup encounters. 2. Shells and ornaments, symbols across space. Shells, animal teeth, and drilled stone beads are common finds at Ice Age sites, even hundreds of kilometers from the sea. Blombos Cave in South Africa, dated to over 70,000 years ago, contained dozens of perforated shells, clearly used as necklaces or bracelets. In Europe, marine shells found in inland mountain caves prove that exchange occurred between coastal and inland groups. For prehistoric people, these ornaments were not just decorative. They held social and spiritual meaning. A shell necklace could indicate status, a role within the group, or a link to a distant community. Ornaments often appeared in rituals, burials, or as marriage gifts. Shells also served as tangible proof of inter-regional contact. By examining the color, shape, and species, the recipient could identify the object's origin and the group that brought it. This was a kind of symbolic language that transcended spoken barriers, enabling communication through objects. 3. Mineral pigments, from art to ritual. Among the most intriguing trade items of the Ice Age were mineral pigments, especially red from hematite, ochre, black from manganese, and yellow from limonite. These substances were ground into powder to paint bodies, decorate tools, or create cave art. What is striking is that many caves with paintings and hand stencils contain pigments from sources hundreds of kilometers away. For example, Lascaux and Chauvet caves in France contain large amounts of manganese and hematite traced to distant mines. This proves pigments were highly valued trade goods. The significance of pigments went beyond aesthetics. In many cultures, red symbolized blood, life, and strength. Black represented death, night, and power. Yellow was linked to the sun and abundance. Possessing and using pigments was a way to express spiritual authority, religious roles, or social rank. Value beyond practical use. The common thread among these three categories of goods is that their value was not limited to physical utility. They carried social information, cultural symbolism, and spiritual weight. A fine flint blade was both a tool and proof of wide trade connections. A shell necklace was both jewelry and a social passport. A pouch of red pigment was both art material and ritual equipment. This is why these items motivated humans to cross great distances, braving severe climates in search of trade. Archaeological evidence of journeys hundreds of kilometers long. Today, with chemical and isotopic analysis, scientists can trace the origins of flint, shells, and pigments from prehistoric sites. Results show that many items traveled over 200 to 300 kilometers. This means trade routes were not random events, but enduring networks sustained for generations. These findings confirm that even in a cold, dangerous world, humans sought connection. Ice Age trade was not an optional extra. It was a core survival strategy, blending material needs, symbolic meaning, and social bonds. Art 3. Trade journeys, the ice-bound routes. During the Ice Age, every trading expedition was a high-risk undertaking that demanded meticulous preparation. Human groups had to traverse a variety of harsh landscapes, from vast frozen plains and frozen rivers to dense taiga forests where predators prowled. Every stage of the journey carried danger. blizzards, cracking ice, wild animals, and encounters with unfamiliar groups whose intentions were uncertain. Travel in frozen conditions. These routes were not fixed roads as we know them today, but seasonal pathways. In winter, frozen rivers became straight and reliable transport corridors. In the short summer, melting snow and swollen rivers turned waterways into hazards, forcing travelers to detour over hills or follow dry valleys. On the icy steppe, navigation depended on landmarks such as mountain ranges, tree clusters, and water sources, which also served as resting points. Temporary transit points. Over long distances, humans established transit points, temporary meeting places for multiple groups. These were often in strategic locations, near water, along animal migration routes, or close to valuable resource sites. A transit point might last only a few weeks or recur annually at the same time, depending on the season and hunting conditions. At these hubs, groups exchanged not only goods, but also information, hunting prospects, weather patterns, outbreaks of disease, or reports of conflict elsewhere. Sometimes, these gatherings became occasions for rituals, marking bonds between communities. The presence of multiple groups at once also provided opportunities to seek marriage partners and cement alliances. The role of intermediary leaders. In an environment where trust was not automatic, intermediary leaders played a crucial role. These were individuals or groups respected by both sides. Their job was to ensure fair exchanges, prevent conflict, and mediate disputes when they arose. Such leaders were often seasoned travelers, familiar with the languages and customs of multiple groups. They were also responsible for security. Unspoken rules reduced the risk of violence. Trade had to occur in neutral territory. Weapons were kept out of hand during approach. Goods were displayed openly so all parties could see. These practices protected participants and sustained long-term exchange networks. The prehistoric trade network. From a modern perspective, these routes were a primitive version of international trade corridors. There were no signposts or toll stations, but there were nodes, the transit points, and corridors, safe passages used by many groups. Some routes were especially important, linking major resource zones, coastal to inland paths for shells and seafood, Flint mine to hunting ground routes for tool supply, and mountain to settlement trails for pigment exchange. These routes endured for generations, and archaeological evidence shows knowledge of them was passed down through oral tradition. Parallels with modern trade routes. Despite tens of thousands of years separating them, the principles of Ice Age trade networks were similar to today's. Modern commerce also relies on transit hubs, ports, airports, central warehouses, secure transport corridors, and intermediaries, now in the form of trade organizations or governments, to ensure fair dealings. The main difference lay in transport. Today, goods move by ships, planes, and trucks. In the Ice Age, all transport depended on human muscle and sometimes dog or reindeer power. A delivery could take weeks or months, with every trip carrying the risk of never returning. Yet, despite these difficulties, prehistoric trade networks persisted and grew, proof that the need for connection and exchange is deeply embedded in human nature. These frozen pathways laid the groundwork for later intercontinental trade routes, from the Silk Road to modern global commerce. Part 4. Marriage and Alliance. Trade beyond goods. In the Ice Age, trade between human groups was not merely about material exchange. It was also a bridge for social relations, paving the way for long-term alliances through marriage. Exchanging a wife or husband between groups was not simply a personal matter. It was a socio-political strategy designed to build trust and ensure future cooperation. Marriage as a diplomatic tool. In a harsh environment, no group could be entirely self-sufficient. Intertribal marriage created kinship ties that crossed territorial boundaries. When a woman from Group A married a man from Group B, or vice versa, Their families became mutually invested in each other's survival. Each side became part of a wider support network, ready to share food, information, or aid in times of crisis. This type of alliance also reduced the risk of conflict. When two groups were bound by marriage, disputes over resources or territory were less likely. Negotiations were smoother because each side had a family member on the other side to act as a bridge. The two-way link between trade and marriage. Trade facilitated regular meetings between groups, creating opportunities for partnerships to form. Conversely, marriage reinforced trade routes by increasing trust. A supply line between two communities with family ties was less likely to be interrupted, as kinship created social pressure to maintain peace. Often, marriage was accompanied by the exchange of valuable goods, stone tools, shells, or rare pigments, not only as dowries, but also as public statements of alliance. These gifts were symbolic, representing a family's power and access to resources. Archaeological evidence of interregional kinship archaeology provides clear signs of social connections spanning large distances. Some inland sites have yielded ornaments made from marine shells or gemstones found only in far-off regions. For example, in European Upper Paleolithic sites, many artifacts originated more than 300 kilometers away, well beyond the normal travel range of a single hunting-gathering group. The most plausible explanation is that these objects traveled with people, specifically through intertribal marriages. A woman might bring a shell necklace from her coastal homeland to a mountain community, or a man might carry flint tools from his birthplace to gift his wife's kin. Over time, such objects became tangible proof of kinship networks extending across wide territories. An expanded support network. The combination of trade and marriage created extended social networks, a kind of prehistoric welfare system. If a group failed in the hunting season or lost its primary food source, it could turn to in-laws in other regions for assistance. This dramatically improved survival odds in a world of shifting climate and resources. Beyond food, these networks shared information on animal migrations, new resource sites, or emerging dangers. In a world without maps or formal communication systems, such intelligence was as valuable as food or weapons. Evolutionary and cultural significance. From an evolutionary perspective, interregional marriage increased genetic diversity, reducing the risk of inbreeding-related weaknesses. Culturally, it fostered the exchange of languages, customs, and craftsmanship. A tool design, a jewelry style, or a ritual could spread from one group to another via people moving for marriage. Thus, trade and marriage formed two parallel pillars sustaining connection in the Ice Age. One secured material resources, the other reinforced social bonds. Together, they built a robust network that allowed humans not only to survive, but to expand their range and influence in a frozen, unforgiving world. Part 5. Trade as social glue. In the Ice Age, trade was more than a means of exchanging goods to meet material needs. It served as a kind of social adhesive, forging connections that reached far beyond territorial boundaries and geographical distance. A sense of belonging to a larger network. When a hunting-gathering group knew it had stable exchange relations with multiple other communities, it no longer relied solely on the resources of its immediate surroundings. This connectivity provided a sense of safety and of belonging to a much wider network. Every trading encounter reaffirmed that they were not alone in the frozen world, that beyond their territory existed allied communities. His sense of belonging was not just symbolic. It had real survival value. A small group might struggle to endure a severe winter, but as part of a trade alliance network, they could count on timely aid in the form of food, tools, or crucial information, expanding opportunities for knowledge and skills. Ice Age trade did not only move goods, it also carried ideas. When one group introduced a new spear point design, a more efficient sharpening method, or a better technique for preserving meat, that knowledge could spread quickly along trade routes. Every object, as it passed from one set of hands to another, carried with it the story and skill behind its creation or use. This process drove technological synchronization on a broad scale, enabling communities to evolve in parallel rather than leaving some behind. Continuous cross-pollination of ideas may have been one reason Homo sapiens maintained a competitive edge over other human species like the Neanderthals, whose trade networks and social linkages appear to have been more limited. Parallels with modern society. The same principle operates today. Modern international trade on a vastly larger scale and with far more complex technology still fulfills the core function of connecting communities and enabling the exchange of knowledge. Global shipping routes, air corridors, and the internet are modern versions of the Ice Age's frozen trails. In both eras, trade has been not just the movement of material goods, but also a channel for sharing information, culture, and innovation. The main differences are speed and scope. Where once it might take months to deliver a pouch of red pigment, today, goods and ideas can cross the world in hours. Trade is a driver of the Homo sapiens super society. Anthropologists argue that trade was a key factor in the emergence of super societies, large-scale communities linked far beyond the circle of close kin. The ability to cooperate and share resources with unrelated individuals is a hallmark of modern humans, and trade was one of the main tools that nurtured this trait. Through trade, Homo sapiens could create support networks spanning hundreds, even thousands, of kilometers. This expanded their adaptability in the face of climate change, resource crises, or conflict. Groups no longer existed as isolated units. They became interconnected nodes in a broader, more flexible, and more resilient social system. Archaeological evidence supports the theory finds from prehistoric sites clearly demonstrate the social role of trade. Patterned seashells from Blombos Cave in South Africa indicate exchange between coastal and inland communities, with artistic and symbolic value attached. Flint from the Spiennes Quarry in Belgium has been found at sites hundreds of kilometers away, proving the existence of long-distance supply lines. Red and black pigments found in caves far from any mineral source suggest these materials passed through many hands before reaching their final users. Such evidence reflects not only the movement of goods, but also the level of trust and cooperation between groups. Maintaining these exchange routes over generations required stable social structures and unspoken agreements to avoid conflict. Conclusion: in a frozen world where death was a constant threat, trade acted as an invisible bond folding communities together. It created a sense of belonging to something larger, fueled the spread of knowledge, and formed the foundation for the super societies that Homo sapiens built. The image of a prehistoric human handing a flint blade to someone from another tribe amid the endless white of snow marks the beginning of a story that continues today as hands still reach out to exchange goods, now clasping in agreement on the global trading floors of the modern world.